On November 14, 2019, the estate sale at 1847 Blackwood Avenue lasted exactly 43 minutes before it was shut down. The auctioneer, a man named Gerald Pitts who had conducted over 2,000 sales in his 30-year career, walked out of the Victorian house and refused to go back inside. When pressed by the family's attorney, he would only say 3 words: the doll moved. Inside the master bedroom, sitting in a child's rocking chair that had begun moving on its own, was a porcelain doll with human hair. Real human hair. The family who inherited the house tried to throw it away 4 times. It appeared back in that same rocking chair every single time. Tonight, you're going to learn about 7 cursed dolls that didn't just frighten their owners. They destroyed them. Completely. And one of them might already be in your town. In 1987, Margaret Chen purchased what she thought was an antique Chinese doll from a flea market in Portland, Oregon. The vendor, an elderly woman with milky white eyes, sold it to her for $3. Margaret later told investigators that the woman had smiled when she took the money. A smile, she said, that showed too many teeth. The doll stood 14 inches tall, dressed in rotting silk, its painted face cracked down the middle like something had tried to split it open from the inside. Margaret placed it on her fireplace mantel. That night, she woke to the sound of singing. A child's voice, singing in a language she didn't recognize. The sound was coming from downstairs. When she found the doll, it had moved to the kitchen table. Its head had turned to face the doorway where Margaret stood. She tried to throw it away the next morning. The garbage truck came. The doll remained on her porch. She tried again. And again. Finally, terrified and sleepless, Margaret decided to burn it. She drove to a field outside the city, doused the doll in gasoline, and set it ablaze. The flames turned black. Thick, oily smoke rose into the sky, and Margaret swore she could hear screaming from inside the fire. Not the doll. Something that had been living inside the doll. When the flames died down, the doll sat in the ashes. Unmarked. Untouched. Smiling. Margaret Chen checked herself into a psychiatric facility 3 days later. She never checked out. The doll was found in her hospital room, sitting on the chair beside her bed. The nurses swear they locked the doors. They swear no one could have brought it inside. The Weatherby family of Charleston, South Carolina found the doll in their attic in March of 2003. They had just moved into the house, a plantation-era estate with a history no realtor fully disclosed. The doll was crude, handmade, stitched together from burlap and cloth. But its face was porcelain. Smooth. Perfectly detailed. And it looked exactly like their daughter. 8-year-old Emma Weatherby saw it first. She came downstairs holding it, asking her mother why someone had made a doll that looked just like her. Her mother, Patricia, felt her blood go cold. The resemblance was impossible. Every detail. The shape of Emma's eyes. The small birthmark on her left cheek. Even the way Emma's hair parted slightly to the right. This doll had been in that attic for decades, maybe longer. It couldn't look like Emma. But it did. They tried to destroy it that same day. Patricia's husband, Michael, took a hammer to the porcelain face. The face cracked. And beneath the broken porcelain, they saw something that made them both step back in horror. Flesh. The doll had flesh beneath its face. Soft. Warm. Still bleeding from where the hammer had struck. Emma began having nightmares. She would wake up screaming, saying the doll was in her room, standing beside her bed, breathing. Patricia and Michael would find nothing. But Emma's window would be open. Always open, even though they locked it every night. On the 7th night, Emma didn't wake up screaming. She didn't wake up at all. They found her standing in the attic at 3:47 a.m., holding the doll, both of them staring at the wall. When they pulled Emma away, she turned to look at them. Her eyes were vacant. Empty. She spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. It wanted to see what I would become. The Weatherby family moved out the next morning. The house still stands. No one has lived there since. And sometimes, late at night, neighbors report seeing a light in the attic window. And the shadow of a small girl holding something in her arms. Antique dealer Howard Marsh acquired the doll at an estate auction in Salem, Massachusetts in October 1999. It came from the collection of Rebecca Thorne, a woman who had died alone in her home, undiscovered for 3 weeks. The doll sat in a glass case, dressed in Victorian funeral clothing. Black lace. Black ribbons. Its eyes were made of genuine human glass prosthetics from the 1800s. Eyes that had once belonged to someone real. Someone dead. Howard placed the doll in his shop window as a Halloween display. That's when the reports started. Customers would glance at the window, then look again, disturbed. They insisted the doll's chest was moving. Rising and falling. Breathing. Howard dismissed it as reflections in the glass, tricks of light. Until he stayed late one evening to finish paperwork. The shop was silent. Empty. And then he heard it. A soft, wet sound. The sound of lungs expanding and contracting. The sound of something drawing breath. He looked up. The doll was staring directly at him. He hadn't moved the case. Hadn't touched anything. But the doll, which had been facing the street, had turned around. Its face pressed against the glass. And it was breathing. Condensation formed on the inside of the case with each exhale. Fog spreading across the glass in rhythmic pulses. Howard ran. He didn't stop running until he reached his car. The next morning, he returned with 2 police officers, trying to explain what he'd seen. They opened the shop. The glass case was empty. The doll was gone. They found it 3 days later. In Howard's home. In his bedroom. Sitting on his pillow. The doors had been locked. The security system had never been triggered. Howard Marsh sold his shop within the week and moved across the country to Arizona. He told his sister the doll had followed him once. He wouldn't let it do it again. In 2004, Howard's neighbors reported a foul smell coming from his apartment. Police found his body in the bedroom. He'd been dead for 6 days. And on the pillow beside him, tucked under his cold, stiff arm, was a Victorian doll in funeral clothing. Its chest still rising. Still falling. Still breathing. In the winter of 1978, the Sullivan family of Bangor, Maine lost their daughter, Claire, to pneumonia. She was 6 years old. 3 months after the funeral, Mrs. Sullivan found a doll in Claire's bedroom, sitting in the chair where Claire used to read. The doll looked like Claire. Same blonde hair. Same blue dress she'd been buried in. Mr. Sullivan insisted they hadn't bought it. No one had been in the house. But there it sat, staring at them with Claire's eyes. Mrs. Sullivan couldn't bring herself to remove it. She would sit in Claire's room for hours, talking to the doll, brushing its hair. Mr. Sullivan grew concerned. Then frightened. Because his wife had started setting a place for the doll at dinner. Started saying goodnight to it. Started calling it Claire. One evening, Mr. Sullivan decided to take the doll away while his wife slept. He drove 20 miles out of town and threw it into a frozen lake, watching it disappear beneath the ice. When he returned home, his wife was in the kitchen. Making breakfast. For 3. The doll sat at the table. Wet. Dripping ice water onto the chair. Smiling. Mrs. Sullivan looked at her husband and said, very calmly, Claire came home. She didn't want to stay in the cold. Over the following weeks, Mrs. Sullivan's behavior changed. She lost weight. Stopped sleeping. Spent all her time in Claire's room with the doll, whispering to it. Mr. Sullivan would press his ear to the door and swear he heard 2 voices. His wife's voice. And a child's voice. Claire's voice. When he finally broke down the door on a February morning in 1979, he found his wife sitting in the rocking chair. Dead. Her face peaceful. And in her arms, the doll. But the doll had changed. Its porcelain skin looked softer, more lifelike. And its eyes, which had been glass, now moved. Tracked Mr. Sullivan as he stood in the doorway. The doll opened its mouth. And in his dead daughter's voice, it said, "Mommy's with me now, Daddy. Don't you want to be a family again?" They found Mr. Sullivan 3 days later, hanging in the garage. The coroner ruled it a suicide. The doll was never found. But sometimes, late at night, people in Bangor report seeing a little girl in a blue dress, walking alone through the snow, carrying something in her arms. Something that looks just like her. There are cursed objects that become legends. And then there's Robert. In 1906, a Bahamian servant gave young Robert Eugene Otto a doll in Key West, Florida. The servant, mistreated by the family and rumored to practice dark magic, filled the doll with materials no child's toy should contain. Hair. Bone. Something else. Something that moved when no one was watching. Robert the doll stood 3 feet tall, dressed in a sailor suit, clutching a stuffed lion. Its face was neither child nor adult, frozen in an expression witnesses describe as aware. Eugene kept Robert his entire life. He gave the doll its own room, its own chair by the window. Visitors to the house reported hearing giggles from that room when no one was inside. Footsteps on the stairs. And Eugene, even as an adult, would blame Robert when things went wrong. Robert did it, he would say. Robert didn't like that. After Eugene's death in 1974, the house was sold. The new owners found Robert in the attic. They gave it to their young daughter. She began screaming in the night, saying Robert was trying to kill her. The doll would be in different positions each morning. Different rooms. Its expression somehow changed, more malicious. The family donated Robert to the East Martello Museum in 1994. He remains there today, behind glass in a dim room that visitors say feels wrong. Suffocating. Cold even in the Florida heat. Cameras malfunction near Robert's case. Visitors report that photographs show Robert in different positions than when they took them. And if you don't ask Robert's permission before taking his picture, things happen. Letters arrive at the museum weekly. Apologies from visitors who photographed Robert without asking. Letters describing car accidents, illnesses, job losses, relationships destroyed. All since visiting Robert. All since looking into those black, aware eyes. The museum staff will tell you Robert's just a doll. But they won't meet your eyes when they say it. And they never, ever stay in that room after dark. Because at night, they say you can hear it. Robert's shoes. Clicking on the floor. Walking. The Grandview Hotel in Savannah, Georgia demolished room 302 in 2011. Not renovated. Not remodeled. Completely demolished, the space divided between rooms 301 and 303, as if 302 had never existed. This is why. In 2009, a guest named Marcus Webb checked into room 302 for a 3-night business stay. Housekeeping found him on the morning of day 2, unresponsive, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He was breathing. Heart beating. But completely catatonic. In his hand, he clutched a small porcelain doll, Victorian era, its dress the color of dried blood. No one knew where the doll came from. It wasn't hotel property. Marcus hadn't checked in with it. Security footage showed him entering the room alone, with only his briefcase. The doll simply appeared. Marcus Webb never recovered. He remains in a care facility, unresponsive, still clutching that doll. Doctors tried to remove it once. Marcus began seizing so violently they feared he would die. When they returned the doll to his hands, he calmed. His eyes, witnesses say, filled with tears. After Marcus was taken away, the hotel tried to dispose of the doll. It reappeared in room 302. They tried again. It returned. A priest was called to bless the room. He left after 15 minutes, pale and shaking, refusing to discuss what he'd experienced. Then the second incident occurred. A couple on their anniversary checked into 302. By morning, they were both found in the same state as Marcus. Catatonic. Eyes open. Each holding the doll, even though there had been only one. Now there were two. Identical. The hotel sealed the room. But guests in 301 and 303 complained of scratching sounds in the walls. Of children's laughter. Of waking in the night to find their doors open and something small moving in the hallway. The hotel's solution was extreme. Demolish the room entirely. Erase it. During demolition, workers found something in the walls. Not behind the walls. Inside them, as if built into the structure itself. Dozens of dolls. Maybe hundreds. All identical. All dressed in dried blood red. All arranged facing inward, toward where the bed had been. The workers refused to continue. The hotel hired a different crew, sworn to secrecy. The dolls were removed. Destroyed. Burned in an industrial incinerator outside the city. The hotel manager personally watched them burn. Every single one. But sometimes, guests in rooms 301 and 303 still report strange occurrences. The feeling of being watched. The sound of porcelain clicking on hardwood. And occasionally, left on pillows when housekeeping arrives, they find small, red dresses. Empty. Neatly folded. Still warm. There's one more story. One more cursed doll that I haven't told you about yet. Number 1 on this list. But this one is different. This one doesn't stay in museums or demolished hotel rooms. This one moves. City to city. House to house. It finds people. Chooses them. And once it chooses you, there's no refusing it. No escaping it. In 1952, it was in Boston. In 1971, Seattle. In 1998, Atlanta. And in 2023, it appeared in a thrift store in a town I can't name yet. Someone bought it. Someone brought it home. And that person has been leaving messages. Warnings. Describing what's happening to them. What the doll is doing. I have those messages. And next time, I'm going to share them with you. But I need you to understand something first. If you hear this next story, if you listen to what this doll does, it might hear you listening. It might know. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to know which doll is number 1? Because once you know its name, it knows yours too.